Well, welcome. This is a historic event, the first time there's been a panel at AALS focusing on non-human animals exclusively. My name is Joan Schaffner. I'm a professor at the George Washington University Law School, and I run our animal law program. I'm here just to sort of introduce what we're trying to do here, and then I'm going to turn it over to the people who really know the stuff and talk about the panel, the great panel we've put together for this afternoon. As many of you probably know, issues surrounding animals in the law have been gaining tremendous interest, especially recently. In 2005, when Hurricane Katrina struck the Gulf Coast, thousands of people were forced to flee without their companion animals or risk death by remaining at home to protect them. Myriad legal issues followed this, including questions of proper holding periods, transfer of ownership, and liability of rescuers. Congress subsequently passed legislation requiring that states include animals in their emergency evacuation plans in order to receive federal funding to support such plans. Early this year, we'll all remember the contaminated pet food that affected literally thousands of animals, resulting in the death of hundreds of them, and the recall of hundreds of thousands of bags and cans of pet food that was sold over a period of several weeks. Of course, scores of legal issues are developing around this episode, questions of liability, and especially the proper remedy for the loss of one's companion animal. Most recently, we have Michael Vick, right, who was charged with animal fighting, a felony under both federal law and in many states, and the huge underground enterprise in animal fighting was exposed to a horrified public. Also, even most recently in my neighborhood, one of the largest puppy mill enterprises in Virginia was disclosed, and over 1,000 dogs were rescued from deplorable circumstances of cruelty and neglect. These highly publicized tragedies reflect only a small part of the policy and law that governs our relationship with animals. As we know, we use animals for companionship and service, for food and clothing, for research and entertainment, and the law regulates our use of and relationship with these animals and is developing dramatically as human society alters its views of its relationship to non-humans. Currently, over 90 law schools have a class on animal law, and approximately 25 of those classes are being taught by full-time faculty of AALS member schools. Over 100 law schools have a student chapter of the Animal Legal Defense Fund. There are now 5 journals devoted to animal law, and we are gaining several casebooks on the area. In 2006, Carolina Academic Press published the 3rd edition of the casebook Animal Law, co-authored by Pamela Frasch, Sonia Weissman, and Bruce Wagman, and a new casebook, Animal Law, Welfare, Interests, and Rights, by Professor David Favor, is expected to be published this year. The practicing bar is also embracing this area of the law. Currently, over 10 state bars have sections or committees devoted to animal law, and another 9 regional bar sections or committees of animal law exist. And perhaps most significantly, the American Bar Association Trial and Insurance Practice Section established an animal law committee in 2005, which has been extremely active since its inception. It is time for the premier legal academic association, the American Association of Law Schools, to embrace this area of the law as well. Animal law is a very diverse legal field and cuts across all substantive areas of the law, including torts, contracts, property, family, criminal, administrative, international, and environmental law. And because the area of law is so diverse, no existing section of the AALS serves the needs of faculty who teach and write in this area of the law. Further, animal law is a relatively new field of study and practice, and thus many of the issues that are being encountered raise fascinating, cutting-edge issues. In light of this, faculty who work in the area of animal law need a section devoted to their interests in order to facilitate discussion of these myriad legal issues and help advance this area of the law. With that, I now want to turn over the podium to Professor Kathy Hessler, who will moderate the panel, Debating Animals as Legal Persons.
So why are we here? Some of you have lots of familiarity with animal law already. Some of you have written in the area, and some of you may not. So very briefly, we are here because animals are considered property in our society. Okay. So we know that. There's a problem with that. There's a problem both sort of morally, potentially, depending on your framework, but certainly legally, instrumentally. We are not finding that this legal framework fits. It doesn't fit for any number of reasons. It doesn't fit because our cultural reality in this country at this point in time, but certainly even historically, we don't treat the animals that we live with as property, and yet the laws do. So that's just one measure of looking at why this doesn't fit. And we tend, I think, in the conversations around personhood to focus on our conversations around animals and in the companion process. We have different conversations about animals when they're in different contexts. And so part of what we're going to be focusing on today is looking at sort of the companion animals and animals as persons, legal persons, in that context. So one really quick dichotomy just to illustrate what I'm saying. So if you're a vet and you treat animals, you actually depend for your practice, your economic sustainability. You depend on the fact that your clients, the human beings who bring in their animals, don't treat their animals as property. Because if they had a broken toaster, they would not spend $100 to fix a $10 toaster, but that's what people do with animals. These decisions do not make economic sense. They're not rational choice if people are only making decisions based on economics and property. Therefore, there's a problem, right? There's a dissonance. And that dissonance is especially interesting in the vet field because on the first hand, the vets rely on the fact that people do not treat their animals as property for their livelihood. And on the backhand, those vets who are negligent and proven negligent then want to assert as a limitation on the recovery and the damages that in fact animals are property. Okay? The irony there is just something I find, it's very useful actually in talking with my students. It's a useful teaching point. That's just one illustration, okay, about why animals as property, no matter how you feel about animals, no matter how you feel about the development of this law, there's a dissonance that needs to be addressed. Clearly, we all have particular points of view about the dissonance and how we might go about fixing it. But that's what we're here to talk about, and that's why we're here. So let me say, first of all, that I'm both privileged to be working with Joan and this wonderful panel of exceedingly, eminently distinguished colleagues. I could not memorize their bios, so I have written down a few things to share with you as I introduce the panel. So sitting immediately to my left, we have Professor David Cassuto from the Pace Law School. He's an associate professor. All of the people on the panel teach in this area, and they also teach, almost all of them also teach in other areas. And one of the wonderful things about animal law is this intersection that Joan talked about. So Professor Cassuto came from private practice, but he's been teaching for a long time. He works in the environmental field. He's also an English expert and a frequent speaker on legal and cultural studies. He teaches professional responsibility, property, animal law, water law, international comparative law, and legal and environmental theory. To his right is Professor David Favor, professor of law at the Michigan State University College of Law, where he's the creator and editor of the Animal Legal and Historical website, which is an incredibly useful resource. If you haven't already found it, please look for it, and also is the home to one of the journals for animal law. He's been teaching there for quite a long time. He teaches animal law, international, environmental law, property, and wildlife law. To his right is Steve Wise, who's an eminent attorney and teaches at many, many places around the country. He currently teaches at Harvard Law School, Vermont Law School, John Marshall Law School, and in the master's program in animals and public policy at Tufts University of Veterinary Medicine. He teaches animal law, all of those places. He's written 2 of the seminal books in the field, and again, if you don't know about them, you should check them out. And then we have Taimie Bryant, who is teaching at the UCLA Law School. She teaches property, nonprofit organizations, and animals and the law. And Taimie has a wonderful sort of intersection with many other kinds of areas of the law that, and her anthropology degree brings a different insight into her teaching about animal law. My name's Kathy Hessler. I teach animal law at Case Western Reserve University.